Beautiful folks, what is up and how are you doing? This is Valentine the Plug. Hicks released another volume of his Impetus sample pack, and I have the privilege of turning one of those beautiful samples into a dope beat. So sit tight and listen to the preview. So you can already see that I did a little bit of chopping up in the stems because Hicks, is so good at layering all of his samples with multiple elements that don't just repeat itself throughout the beat. You hear them at select moments in the beat. I chopped them up just a little bit because I wanted a little bit more control over the elements, and I wanted to decide when they were going to appear in the beat. So that's what I did. Now I'm gonna open up the mixer track and I'm gonna take you through the processing that I applied. So the first thing that I did, you can actually see that I've got an instance of Neutron's EQ on every single track, and that is mostly so that I can open everything in Neutron Visual Mixer. It allows me a degree of control over the positioning of each element. So there's a lot of layers in the sample, like I said, and I think it's important to be able to control which element is panned left, which is more right, which is more centered, which is very wide. I feel that it very much contributes to the ambience and the vibe of the sample that you're trying to create. So please don't sleep on your panning and your centering, because it's very, very important. And it's kind of like those Easter eggs for the listeners when they notice that some elements are more panned to the left than other elements. It really keeps them interested while listening. As for the actual processing, let's start with the keys. Nothing really on the EQ, but I usually do apply a couple of cuts around this frequency range, especially to get out the boxiness. I feel that Hicks may have already done that, so there's really not much that I need to do. I did add a little bit of reverb, of course. Little plate is my standard reverb, and I added crystallizer for some added spaciness, which has my keys, my piano sounding like this. Now pads, as y'all know, I like them dynamic and moving, and the way to accomplish that is with shaper box. There's a high pad and a more low pad, and they both have that tremolo effect, which I achieve in shaper box by basically creating a curve right here. I set it to a quarter note. I put down the mix a little bit so that it's not too apparent. I did the same with the lower pad, quarter note, 45. Siri trying to interrupt me while recording my video, but I also added the instance of filter shaper. So both my pads, being dynamic, moving a lot, sounds like this right now. Now the Rhodes, when I listened to it, was already super dreamy, and I just really wanted to accentuate that. So I opened up Spaced Out. At this point, it's becoming my favorite wet FX reverb delay plugin, just because you can do so many crazy spacey things with it. I use it to accentuate the dreaminess, give it a really wet and lush reverb, of course. Sketch cassette for a little bit of decay. I used a cheap cassette, and I turned up the age slider a little bit, well actually a lot, and I used pan manipulation in shaper box too. So now it sounds like this. And last but not least, of course, there's the vocals. The only thing I did is I opened the instance of doubler, make it a little bit more wider because that's what a chorus effect does. And I turned down I turned on the octave lowering button. I think it's a button, which basically takes the two voices that are being used as part of the chorus effect and it basically pitches them down. So now it sounds like this. And I feel that's a very important effect, especially if you're trying to get more of a trappy feel, because a lot of the vocal samples that we hear in well, mostly darker R&B beats kind of have an additional layering, which is either achieved by using this doubler or through little alter boy or whatever form and shifting plugin that's available to you. So you might be wondering, Plug, what are you gonna do in terms of drums? Honestly, I have no idea, but I recently downloaded this Timbaland kit by the Lunch 77. Yo, big shout outs to that man, of course. I'm not the first and probably not the last to shout this dude out, but he has come through with so many amazing drum kits. I actually want to do some Timbaland style percussion, so I'm gonna try and see if that works. So I got, you know, this kick, and I've got this snare, which I'm pretty sure that you've heard in many of his productions. And I'm just gonna see what I can do in between that to get a nice little Timbaland style groove going on. So I've got the percussion folder of this kit open up, and what I think I'm gonna do is basically just basically, yeah, I know that there's a lot of space between my kick and my snare, right? So I'm gonna see, and I'm gonna try and see what I can fit in between that to get a well, excuse me, I'm gonna try and see what I can get between that to get a nice dope groove going on. So one thing that I want to emphasize is that I didn't do anything special. There's no particular secret. Basically, what I did is I know that here's my kick, here's my snare, and there's a lot of space that I can work with in between. So basically what I did is just, you know, maintain that that 8-note, 16-note pattern where there's just a lot of space that you can utilize to get your groove going on. So that's why there's almost like a similar difference. So basically there's this. It's basically just 16 notes, do whatever you want, go crazy, even turn into 32nd notes if you really want them, you know. If you understand rhythm a little bit, you know, and the power of, you know, varying between 8 notes, 16 notes, 32nd note, and 64th notes, there's so much that you can do in terms of percussion. It's amazing. And one thing that I would definitely recommend is, you know, turn on the metronome if you really want to get an idea of just how much possibilities you have in between the beats. You know, let that world go open for you. Well, I think this might actually be the first video where I'm actually paying a lot of attention to my drums, because mostly I'm about the chords and the melodies and stuff like that. But this is actually the first video where I'm actually paying attention to my drums. Okay, so let's go there and add a little bit of color, or take away a little bit of color by, well, more warmth, a little bit more analog warmth to really get that 90s warmth and grit kind of feel. Alright, so with an 808 pattern in place, relatively simple 808 pattern, let's talk about the arrangement a little bit. What we got is your regular 8-bar intro, introduces the keys and the Rhodes, and in the second half of the intro you get the bells, then the drums kick in, and I take away a lot of the I take away the keys, which is probably the thing that's hanging with you the most, only to introduce it later in, you know, the second part of the first half of the verse. That doesn't make any sense at all either way. So then the keys disappear again, but ooh, you're being introduced to those pads, and those pads you haven't heard before. That's a new element. Suddenly there's a trumpet too. And where are these vocals coming from? Exactly, there's a new, basically the old guard is replaced with a new guard, and then in the hook everything just comes to you. And that's the power of introducing elements only to take them away and reintroduce them later. Keeps your listeners on their feet, because they can never be conditioned to know what they can expect. You're always keeping them on your feet. So the beat as it is right now, it's super dreamy, but I think it could use a bluesy element, and y'all know what that means. I hope y'all enjoyed this little minor pentatonic montage, because I sure as hell did. I know about 4 shapes and I can kind of comfortably shift between them. But once I learn the 5th shape, it's over. It's over for the entire world. So anyways, I processed the guitar using this little chain here, from my multiband to my EQ, sketch cassette for some analog warmth, origin, cymatics origin for some downsampling, and choral and spaced out for some really, really, really wetness. I get it really dripping, drenched in wetness. So now it's sitting nicely in the back, and it kind of sounds like this. Beautiful folks, with that being said, that is a full beat and a completed flip. And once again, big shout outs to Hicks and volume 2 of his Impetus sample pack. Absolutely amazing. And I'm going to be flipping the rest of all of those beautiful little babies, those beautiful little samples, in my own free time. I hope that y'all enjoyed this more drum-centric episode of whatever it is I'm doing. And I hope to catch y'all in the next episode of whatever it is I'm doing. Y'all be easy. Peace.